Captain Li Guan's hands trembled slightly as he straightened his simple black uniform. Through the shuttle's viewport, the Galactic Council station grew larger with each passing second. The massive structure looked like a floating crystal city, its towers spinning slowly in the void of space. Thousands of lights blinked across its surface like stars brought down from heaven. "First time seeing something this big?" asked Dr. Park Hyun-woo, looking up from her tablet. Her voice was calm, but Ji-won could hear the excitement hidden beneath. "Not really," Gi-won replied with a small smile. "But it's the first time I have to pretend to be impressed." The shuttle shuddered as it entered the station's docking bay. Through the thick metal walls, they could hear the hiss of atmosphere being pumped in. Guan took a deep breath and reminded himself of the mission. Earth had waited 300 years for this moment. Everything had to be perfect. "Remember the rules?" he whispered to his team. "We're a young species, I just figured. Out faster than light travel 20 years ago? Our weapons are basic. Our technology is simple. We're grateful just to be here." Dr. Park nodded, but her eyes sparkled with mischief. "It's going to be hard pretending our shuttle runs on fusion power when it's actually powered by a contained black hole. That's exactly why we need to be careful," Ji-won warned. "One slip and they'll know we've been lying about everything." The docking bay doors opened with a loud clang. Immediately, the humans were hit by a wave of strange smells. Ozone, metal, and something that reminded Ji-won of burnt coffee. The gravity felt lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel like a small bounce. The alien welcoming committee was already waiting. Ji-won had studied their files, but seeing them in person was still shocking. The Altarians stood nearly 8 feet tall, their blue skin shimmering under the bright lights. They wore long robes covered in silver patterns. That seemed to move on their own. Their leader, Ambassador Yulter, had 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on his face. All 3 were currently staring at the humans with obvious disappointment. Next to the Altarians stood the Kelvani delegation. They looked like giant praying mantises crossed with spiders, their chitinous bodies clicking and creaking as they moved. Their compound eyes reflected the light like broken mirrors. One of them, probably their leader, stepped forward on legs that bent in ways that hurt to watch. "Welcome, creatures of Earth," Yulter said, his voice echoing strangely through the universal translator device hanging around his neck. "I am Ambassador Yulter of the Altarian Republic. We hope your vessel managed the journey without too much difficulty." The pause before hope told Ji-won everything he needed to know. These aliens had already decided humans were barely worth their time. "Thank you, Ambassador," Gi-won replied, bowing slightly. "Our ship performed admirably. We're honored that the Galactic Council has agreed to consider our application for membership." The Kelvani leader chittered, a sound like breaking glass. "I am Zixgul, of the Kelvani Collective. Your species shows potential. Basic warp drive technology, simple energy weapons, limited terraforming capabilities. With proper guidance from more advanced civilizations, you might achieve middle-tier status within 2 or 3 centuries." Dr. Park made a small choking sound, which she quickly covered with a cough. Gi-won shot her a warning look. "They're simple. Energy weapons could crack planets in half, but the aliens didn't need to know that." "We're eager to learn," Ji-won said humbly. "Any wisdom you could share would be greatly appreciated." The tour of the station began immediately. Yulter led them through corridors lined with what he called advanced holographic displays, flickered and sparked with poor resolution. He proudly showed off the station's state-of-the-art fusion reactors that leaked radiation through inadequate shielding. The defensive systems were laughably weak, and their computer networks used encryption that a human child could crack in minutes. "This is our primary defense grid," Zixgul chittered proudly, gesturing to a wall covered in blinking lights. "Plasma cannons capable of destroying any ship within 50,000 kilometers." Ji-won nodded appreciatively while mentally noting that the station's shields couldn't stop a strong solar wind, let alone a real attack. Their advanced sensors had completely missed the 3 cloaked human observation ships that had been following them since leaving Earth. In the main council chamber, dozens of alien species sat in floating chairs arranged in a massive circle. There were crystalline beings that sang instead of speaking, gas-based creatures contained in environmental suits, and reptilian warriors covered in natural armor. All of them turned to stare at the humans with expressions ranging from mild interest to obvious boredom. "The preliminary assessment is complete," Yalter announced to the assembly. "The human species demonstrates adequate intelligence levels, acceptable physical capabilities, and basic technological development. They show promise for integration into galactic society, though their advancement will require significant time and guidance." Several aliens nodded sagely. Few made notes on glowing tablets. One particularly large creature that looked like a walking tree yawned audibly. "We classify the human species as Tier 7, continued Yulter. "Suitable for limited trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and perhaps minor resource extraction contracts. With proper mentorship, they may eventually qualify for more significant responsibilities." That evening, alone in their assigned quarters, Dr. Park activated a communication device no bigger than a coin. The quantum encryption was so advanced that the alien sensors registered it as a simple wristwatch. "Control, this is Park," she whispered. "Day 1 complete. They've classified us exactly as Command predicted, Tier 7, barely above pre-spaceflight civilizations." "Excellent work, Doctor," came the reply from Earth, the signal having traveled instantly across 1,000 light-years. "Phase 1 is proceeding perfectly. How are they treating you?" "It's like adorable pets who just learned to walk upright," Park replied with a grin. "Yulter actually patted you on the head after the assessment ceremony. Maintain the charade, Control ordered. Remember? We've been preparing for this moment for over 3 centuries. Every human in the galaxy is counting on this mission succeeding." Dr. Park looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, hidden human colonies were watching and waiting. Advanced human fleets patrolled the galaxy's edge, invisible. 2 alien sensors. Earth itself had been carefully disguised to look like a barely habitable world, instead of the technological paradise it had become. "Don't worry," she whispered to the stars. "We'll show them what humanity is really capable of when the time is right. But for now, we play the part of the grateful newcomers." She deactivated the communicator and settled in for sleep, dreaming of the day when the galaxy would learn the truth about Earth's children. The morning alarm echoed through the human quarters. At exactly 0700 station time, Kim Minnow stretched and yawned, looking out at the swirling nebula visible through his window. 3 months on the council station had given him a routine he almost enjoyed. He dressed in the simple gray jumpsuit that marked him as a junior species representative and headed to the Cultural Exchange Center. Today was his turn too. Tell stories to a group of young aliens who attended the station's educational programs. It was probably his favorite part of this whole charade. The exchange center buzzed with activity. Young Altarians with their bright blue skin chatted excitedly with Kelvani juveniles whose chitin shells hadn't yet hardened to adult thickness. A few Zephyrian gas beans floated in their environmental bubbles, their forms shifting like colorful clouds. "Mr. Kim," called out Yaltesh, a young Altarian whose third eye hadn't fully opened yet. "Are you going to tell us more Earth stories today?" Kim smiled genuinely. These kids were actually pretty great, unlike their arrogant parents.
What would
"You like to hear about war stories?" chittered Kexeling, a young Kelvani whose mandibles clicked with excitement. "Tell us about your ancient battles." Kim settled into his chair, surrounded by eager young faces. "Well, there was this time when humans fought a war that lasted 6 years and involved almost every nation on our planet, ... As he described World War II, carefully editing out the more horrific details, the young aliens listened with fascination. Their species had been spacefaring for millennia, but they'd never experienced anything quite like humanity's chaotic history. "Wait," interrupted Yaltesh, her 3 eyes wide. "You used metal projectiles? Like actual pieces of metal flying through the air?" "That's right," Kim nodded. "We called them bullets. Some of our weapons could fire hundreds of them per minute." The aliens exchanged shocked glances. "Hey, but that's so primitive," exclaimed a young Zephyrian, his gaseous form turning a darker shade of purple. "Why didn't you use plasma weapons or energy beams?" Kim shrugged with practiced humility. "We hadn't invented those yet. Humans have always had to make do with whatever we could build. We're pretty good at improvising. How did you survive? Asked Kexeling, genuinely curious. If your weapons were so basic, how did your species not destroy itself?
Hey.
Stubborn, Kim replied with a grin. And we look out for each other when things get really bad. Humans don't give up easily. Meanwhile, in the main council chambers, things were getting heated in a very different way. The massive circular room echoed with angry voices as two of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations squared off. Fleet. Admiral Kethmer of the hegemony of Vex stood at the central podium, his reptilian features twisted with rage. His scaled hands gripped the edges of the speaking platform so tightly that small cracks appeared in the metal. The Talon Empire has gone too far, he roared, his voice carrying across the chamber without need for amplification. They're illegal. Mining operations in the Sigma Drift violate every treaty we've signed for the past millennium. The holographic projector in the center of the room flickered to life, showing the image of Empress Erythal of the Talon Empire. Her crystalline body caught the light and threw it back in angry flashes, creating rainbow patterns on the chamber walls. The hegemony dares speak of violations. Her voice rang like breaking glass. Your so-called research stations are bristling. With enough weapons to level a moon, you've turned the entire sector into an armed camp. Captain Juwan sat in the designated human section, a small area with just 3 chairs that seemed almost forgotten in the corner. He watched the argument with careful attention, taking mental notes on fleet positions, weapon capabilities, and tactical weaknesses. Both sides were revealing far more than they realized. Dr. Park leaned over and whispered, "The hegemony's new plasma cannons are using trionic fusion cores. Our energy output is actually decreasing with each shot. And the Talon shields use rotating frequency modulation," Giwan whispered back. "But they're only cycling through 12 patterns. A child could break that encryption." Other council members tried to restore order, but the situation kept escalating. Ambassador Yulter called for calm, but his 3 eyes showed obvious worry. Wars between major powers tended to drag smaller species into the conflict whether they wanted to be involved or not. Finally, Captain Jawan stood up and raised his hand politely. "Honored representatives, might I suggest?" The chamber fell silent for a moment, then erupted in what could only be called polite laughter. Several aliens actually covered their mouths to hide their amusement. Ambassador Yulter-S's expression softened into the kind of smile adults give to children who say something cute. "Captain Juwan, your species has such noble intentions. We truly appreciate your desire to help. But this conflict involves complex political and military considerations that require, well, let's say, more experience with galactic affairs. Perhaps in a few centuries," added Counselor Vexahan of the hegemony,
Not unkindly.
"when humanity has had time to develop a deeper understanding of interstellar relations, your input might be more ... applicable." Guan bowed slightly and sat back down, but Dr. Park caught the almost invisible tightening of his jaw muscles. She knew that look. It was the same expression human diplomats had worn for centuries when dealing with arrogant opponents, who had no idea what they were really facing. The argument continued for hours, growing more heated with each exchange. Reports began filtering in from the disputed sector, patrol ships engaging in hit-and-run attacks, mining stations going dark, civilian transports being accidentally fired upon. That evening, Dr. Park stood alone in the observation lounge, watching the stars through the massive transparent aluminum windows. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman who appeared to be in her early 30s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see: a primitive human struggling to understand the complexities of galactic civilization. They had no idea that the nanites in her bloodstream had been keeping her body in perfect condition for over a century. They couldn't detect the quantum processors woven into her neural tissue that could calculate faster than light trajectories in microseconds. They certainly didn't know that she had personally overseen the destruction of 3 different star systems during humanity's early expansion wars. "Patience," she whispered to her reflection, repeating the mantra that had guided human diplomacy. "For 300 years, let them think they know us. Let them underestimate what we're capable of. Behind her, the door chimed softly. Captain Juan entered, looking tired but alert. "How are you holding up?" Park asked without turning around. "It's harder than I expected," Juan admitted, joining her at the window. "Watching them fumble around with technology we mastered centuries ago. Listening to them talk about humans like we're barely sentient pets." "That's exactly what we want them to think," Park reminded him gently. "The moment they realize what humanity really is, this peaceful integration becomes impossible. We've seen it happen before." Juan nodded, but his expression remained frustrated. "I know. It's just ... Watching those two powers tear each other apart over a mining dispute when we could solve the whole thing in an afternoon ... We will solve it," Park said quietly, "when the time is right. When they're ready to see us as equals instead of curiosities." In the distance, the lights of departing warships could be seen as both the Hegemony and Talon Empire mobilized there. Fleets. The first interstellar war in over 2 centuries was about to begin. And the aliens had just dismissed the one species that could have prevented it. Dr. Park smiled sadly and activated her quantum communicator. "Control, this is Park. Situation is escalating as predicted. Request permission to move to Phase 2. "Denied," came the reply from Earth. "Maintain current protocols. Let them fight their little war. When they realize they need help, they'll be much more receptive to humanity's true capabilities." Deactivated the device and returned to watching the stars, counting the warships as they jumped to hyperspace. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of. Dr. Park Hyun-woo was dreaming of. Earth's cherry blossoms when the alarms tore through her sleep like a scream. The piercing wail bounced off the metal walls of her quarters, growing louder with each second. At emergency lights flashed red, painting everything in bloody shadows. She rolled out of bed, her enhanced reflexes already kicking in. After a century of military service, she could go from deep sleep to full combat readiness in under 10 seconds. The nanites in her bloodstream flooded her system with adrenaline and focus enhancers. "Park to Giwon," she spoke into her communicator, while pulling on her clothes. "What's the situation?" Guan's voice crackled back, tight with controlled tension. "Unknown contacts at the system's edge. Massive fleet. The aliens are panicking." Park was already running down the corridor toward the council chambers. Other beings stumbled past her, their faces showing confusion and fear. She noticed that several Altarian guards were openly weeping, their blue skin pale with terror. The council chambers had transformed into chaos. The normally dignified representatives were shouting over each other, their translator devices creating a cacophony of overlapping voices in dozens of languages. The massive central display showed a tactical view of the star system. What Park saw there made her blood run cold. Ships, thousands of them, emerging from hyperspace at the system's outer edge, like a swarm of metallic wasps. But these weren't like any vessels in the galactic registry. They were wrong in every way that mattered. Each ship was perfectly smooth, its hull a matte black that seemed to drink in the light from nearby stars. They moved with predatory grace, adjusting their formations with mathematical precision. Worst of all were the markings etched into their hulls, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe when you looked at them directly. "By the eternal void," whispered Ambassador Yulter, all 3 of his eyes wide with a terror Park had never seen before. "The harvesters have returned." The name sent a chill through every alien in the chamber. Park accessed her memory files, pulling up classified human intelligence reports. The harvesters, an ancient machine intelligence that had swept through the galaxy 10,000 years ago, consuming entire civilizations before mysteriously vanishing. Every schoolchild in the galaxy knew their name, but they were supposed to be legends, stories told to frighten the young. "Possible," chittered Counselor Zixcall, his mandibles clicking frantically. "Our ancestors destroyed them. The Great Purge eliminated every trace of their technology." On the display, the harvester fleet began to move toward the inhabited inner system. There were so many ships that the scanner couldn't give an accurate count. The display simply read 9,999 plus and flashed an error message. "All defense fleets, this is Admiral Kethmer. The hegemony commander's voice boomed through the communications array, his usual arrogance replaced by desperate determination. Forget our differences. Converge on the Harvester formation. For the sake of all life in the galaxy. The holographic projector flickered, showing Empress Zarathul of the Talon Empire. Her crystalline features were hard as diamonds, but Park could see the fear in her multifaceted eyes. Talon forces are moving to intercept, whatever our disputes. We stand together against extinction. Park watched as the galaxy's greatest military powers mobilized for war. Hegemony dreadnoughts powered up their plasma cannons, while Talon battlecruisers charged their energy shields. The Altarian Republic's finest warships formed defensive formations around the station. Even smaller powers, like the Kelvani Collective, sent their patrol fleets racing toward the approaching darkness. Captain Jiwan stood beside her, his face a mask of calm professionalism. But Park noticed his fingers drumming against his leg, the old signal they'd used during their academy days. He was asking for permission to break cover. She shook her head slightly. Not yet. They had to see how bad things would get before revealing humanity's true nature. The first engagement happened at the edge of the system, near the gas giant Vexala. The combined alien fleets, over 3,000 ships, representing the pinnacle of galactic military technology, met the Harvester. Vanguard in a blaze of energy weapons and missile fire, for exactly 37 seconds. It looked like the aliens might have a chance. Their plasma cannons lit up space like artificial stars, and their quantum torpedoes tore through the void. With trails of twisted aspired men, then the Harvesters fired back. Their weapons didn't look like anything Park had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they fired something that looked like tears in reality itself. Dark rifts that reached across impossible distances, touching the alien ships and simply unmaking them. A hegemony dreadnought, 3 kilometers of armored death, touched one of those dark rifts and came apart at the molecular level. It didn't explode or burn, it just ceased to exist, leaving behind a cloud of scattered atoms. Casualty. Reports coming in, announced a Kelvani technician, his voice cracking with horror. The hegemony's third fleet. ... Total loss. Talon forces have lost 80% of their battle group. Altarian reserves are, oh gods, they're all gone. The tactical display updated in real time, showing friendly contacts winking out one by one. In less than an hour, the greatest military armada in galactic history had been reduced to scattered survivors running. For their lives, the Harvesters barely slowed down. They swept through the debris field like it was empty space. There, dark holes untouched by any weapon the aliens had fired. Their formation never wavered, their advance never faltered. Ambassador Yulter turned to the human delegation with the desperate hope of a drowning man grasping for driftwood, his 3 eyes fixed on Captain Jiwan with pathetic pleading. "Species," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Surely you have some military assets, any ships at all that could help? We're facing extinction." Park felt every alien eye in the chamber turn toward them. These beings who had dismissed humanity as primitive pets were now begging for help from the very species they'd been patronizing for months. Captain Jiwan stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. The chaos around him seemed to fade as he became the center of attention. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that Park had rarely heard him use. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," he said simply. The aliens looked confused by his composure. Here was a member of a primitive species, apparently unaffected by the sight of the galaxy's greatest fleets being destroyed like toys. "But surely you understand the urgency," Yulter pressed. "Every moment we delay, more lives are lost." "I understand perfectly," Guan replied. "Give me 5 minutes." He turned and walked toward the exit, gesturing for Park to follow. Behind them, aliens erupted in fresh panic as the Harvester fleet continued its inexorable advance toward the station. In the privacy of their quarters, Juan activated the quantum communicator with hands that were perfectly steady. Park watched. As he composed himself, transforming from the humble human diplomat into something far more dangerous. "Control, this is Captain Juan," he spoke into the device. "The Harvester protocol has been activated. Ancient machine intelligence, confirmed hostile, engaging Galactic Coalition forces, requesting immediate authorization for Revelation Directive. The response came back instantly, transmitted across 1,000 light-years in the space between heartbeats. Authorization granted, Captain. Protocol 7 is now active. All restrictions lifted. Show them what humanity really is. Dr. Park felt a chill of anticipation run down her spine. After 3 centuries of hiding, of pretending to be weak and harmless, humanity was finally going to reveal its true face to the galaxy. Send the signal, Jiwan ordered, his eyes now cold as winter stars. Tell them we're coming. Park activated her own communicator, inputting codes that had been memorized but never used. Deep in space, hidden human fleets received the message and began to move. The galaxy was about to discover that Earth's children had been holding back, far more than anyone could have imagined. The age of deception was over. The age of revelation had begun. The first sign something impossible was happening came as a subtle shimmer in space. Dr. Park Hyun-woo watched through the Council Station's main viewport as the stars themselves seemed to bend and twist. The fabric of reality rippled like water, disturbed by a falling stone. "What's happening out there?" whispered Ambassador Yulter, his 3 eyes wide with confusion. The tactical displays were going crazy, showing energy readings that shouldn't exist. Then space tore open, not like a hyperspace jump or wormhole transit that the aliens were familiar with. This was something far more advanced, reality simply folded in on itself, creating a pocket of absolute darkness that hurt to look at directly. From within that darkness, shapes began to emerge. Ships. But calling them ships was like calling a hurricane a gentle breeze. The first vessel to fully materialize was impossibly huge, easily 10 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull gleaming with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its surface was perfectly smooth, made from some material that seemed to absorb and reflect light at the same time. Strange patterns of energy danced across its hull, forming geometric designs that shifted and changed as they watched. "By the ancestors," Empress Zarathal whispered, her crystalline form trembling so violently that she cast rainbow patterns on the chamber walls. "What are those things?" More ships emerged from the tear in space. 50 massive vessels, each one unique in design, but sharing the same impossible technology. Some were shaped like spearheads, others like flowing sculptures of liquid metal. A few defied geometry entirely, their hulls twisted into shapes that made the eye water to follow. The aliens in the council chamber stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. These weren't just ships, they were works of art, demonstrations of technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. Captain Juwan stepped forward, and for the first time since arriving at the station, he stood at his full height. The humble, apologetic diplomat was gone, replaced by something that radiated quiet authority. "Control the station," a voice filled the chamber, speaking in perfect standard galactic, despite clearly being human. "This is Fleet Admiral Kong Haijin of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress signal and are here to provide assistance." The holographic projector in the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing the image of a human woman, who appeared to be middle-aged, but her eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of experience, of battles fought across the galaxy, of secrets that could reshape civilization. "Admiral Kung," Captain Juwan said, his voice carrying a new formality that made several aliens step back unconsciously. "Please explain to our allies what they're witnessing." Admiral Kong's image smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Certainly, Captain. The fleet you see before you represents approximately 1% of humanity's total military capability. We've been operating under certain restrictions." Silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Kethmer of the Hegemony was the first to find his voice, his scaled jaw hanging open like a broken door. 1%? He croaked. "But your species was classified as Tier 7. Your preliminary assessments showed basic technology, limited. CAPABILITIES. Dr. Park stepped forward, and the aliens were shocked to see her previous deference had vanished completely. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, her eyes sharp and calculating. "The assessments showed exactly what we wanted them to show," she said coolly. "Humanity learned a long time ago that revealing our true capabilities too early tends to complicate relationships with other species." On the tactical display, the Harvester fleet had detected the new arrivals. The ancient machines were adjusting their course, their dark vessels accelerating toward the human formation with malevolent purpose. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as the enemy that had just destroyed their greatest fleets prepared to engage these mysterious human ships. "All vessels," Admiral Kong's voice carried across the fleet with calm authority. "Target acquired. Weapons free. Initiate quantum destabilization protocols." What happened next broke every law of physics the aliens thought they understood. The human ships didn't fire energy beams or launch missiles. There was no flash of light, no dramatic explosion of weaponry. Instead, space around the Harvester fleet simply changed. The first wave of enemy ships, massive constructs, that had shrugged off the combined firepower of 6 galactic powers began to come apart. Not destroyed by explosions or vaporized by energy weapons, but unmade at the most fundamental level. Their atomic bonds dissolved. Their matter reorganized itself into harmless particles that drifted away like dust. "Impossible," breathed Ambassador Yulter, his 3 eyes fixed on the display. "The Harvester's shields absorbed everything we threw at them." "How are you? Their defensive systems operate on principles we mastered 800 years ago," Admiral Kang explained matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "We're not fighting them in any traditional sense. We're simply editing their existence out of this reality." The Harvester fleet tried to respond, their reality-tearing weapons reaching out toward the human vessels. But the dark rifts that had torn through alien dreadnoughts simply stopped. They hit the human ships and dissolved harmlessly, like waves breaking against an unmovable cliff. "Their weapons rely on dimensional manipulation," Dr. Park explained to the stunned aliens. "Crude, really? We've been using far more sophisticated techniques for centuries." One by one, the Harvester ships ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not defeated, but simply removed from reality as if they had never been there at all. The ancient threat that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was being erased with the casual efficiency of someone deleting files from a computer. The human fleet hadn't even moved from their initial positions. 50 massive vessels hung in space like sleeping giants, their hulls pulsing with contained power that made the local star look dim by comparison. In less than an hour, it was over. The Harvester fleet, thousands of ships that had seemed unstoppable, was reduced to scattered particles drifting harmlessly through space. The humans had accomplished what the combined might of galactic civilization couldn't even scratch. The council chambers fell into stunned silence. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just hidden some advanced technology, they had concealed their entire evolutionary path, their true place in the galactic hierarchy. Empress Zarathal was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you? What are you really?" Captain Jiwan smiled, and for the first time, the aliens saw something ancient and patient in his expression. Something that had been watching and waiting for precisely this moment. "We're exactly who we've always said we are," he replied calmly. "We're humans from Earth. We just never mentioned that we've been playing on easy mode for the past few centuries." He gestured toward the viewport, where the human fleet hung in space like sleeping dragons. "This is what humanity looks like when we're not holding back. When we're not pretending to be something less than we are." Dr. Park moved to stand beside him, her demeanor now that of a senior military officer rather than a humble scientist. "We gave you the chance to know us as equals. You chose to see us as primitives. Sometimes the only way people learn the truth is when you show them exactly what they've been underestimating." The aliens stared at the human fleet, finally understanding that everything they thought they knew about the galaxy had just changed forever. The council chambers had never been this quiet. 3 weeks after the Harvester incident, every alien representative sat in stunned silence as Dr. Park Hyun-woo stood at the central podium. Behind her, The massive holographic display showed images that were rewriting galactic history in real time. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings of all forms, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. It's time you learned the truth about humanity. The first image appeared, Earth, but not the primitive world the aliens had been told about. This was a planet covered in gleaming cities that stretched into space itself, connected by bridges of pure energy. Orbital rings surrounded the world like jeweled necklaces, each one larger than most space stations. Earth achieved faster-than-light travel 800 years ago, Dr. Park announced calmly. We've been exploring the galaxy since before most of your species developed writing. Ambassador Yulter made a choking sound, his 3 eyes bulging. 800 years? But that would mean ... That we've been here longer than your civilization has existed, Dr. Park confirmed. Yes, that's exactly what it means. The display shifted, showing a star map dotted with thousands of points of light. Each one represented a human colony, a hidden outpost, or a research station. The aliens gasped as they realized the scope of human expansion. We estimate there are currently 47 billion humans living throughout the galaxy, Dr. Park continued. Most of them have never set foot on a planet. They're born in space, in cities that orbit stars or drift between them. The next image showed a Dyson sphere, a massive structure completely surrounding a star, harvesting its entire energy output. The aliens had heard of such things in theory, but seeing one in practice was overwhelming. This is New Kyoto Station, Dr. Park explained. It houses 12 billion people and produces enough energy to power 1,000 worlds. We have 37 of these constructs scattered throughout the galaxy. Kim Minho, sitting in the audience, watched the alien reactions with satisfaction. The young Altarians and Kelvani he'd been telling stories to were staring at the display with their mouths hanging open. Their primitive human friend had just revealed himself to be a member of the most advanced civilization in galactic history. But why? Ambassador Yulter finally managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Why hide all of this? Why pretend? To be primitive newcomers? Captain Jiwan, now revealed as General Jiwan of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, stood to answer. His humble posture was gone, replaced by the bearing of someone who had commanded fleets across the galaxy. Because we learned from our mistakes, he said with quiet authority. Early in our expansion, we made contact with 17 different species. Each time we revealed our true capabilities, the result was the same. Fear, panic, attempted military action against us. The display showed historical footage, human ships arriving at alien worlds, peaceful first contact, attempts turning into desperate battles as primitive species tried to destroy what they couldn't understand. We didn't want to conquer anyone, Jiwan continued. We wanted friends, partners, a place in the galactic community. But every species we met tried to either worship us as gods or destroy us as demons. There was never a middle ground. Dr. Park activated another display, showing the wreckage of destroyed civilizations. 7 of those 17 species we contacted are now extinct. Not because we destroyed them, but because they tore themselves apart trying to fight us. The others, let's just say they're no longer capable of interstellar travel. The aliens in the chamber shifted uncomfortably. The implications were terrifying. Humanity had tried to be peaceful, and their very existence had driven other species to madness. So we developed the restraint protocol, Dr. Park explained. We would hide our true capabilities and pretend to be at the same technological level as whoever we encountered. We would let them teach us things we'd mastered centuries ago. We would act impressed by their achievements. The fleet that destroyed? The Harvesters, asked Empress Zarathol, her crystalline voice trembling. How advanced is it really? Admiral Kong's image appeared in the display, smiling with what might have been amusement. The ships you saw represent our basic patrol fleet. We have vessels that could reshape entire solar systems, weapons that operate by rewriting the laws of physics themselves. The quantum destabilization technology that eliminated the Harvesters, we consider that suitable for training exercises. The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien in the chamber was trying to process the magnitude of what they'd just learned. The species they'd been patronizing for months was so far beyond them technologically that there was no meaningful comparison. So what happens now? Empress Zarathal asked, her voice barely audible. Do you reveal your empire? Do you claim dominion over us all? Dr. Park's expression softened. Nothing changes. We still want exactly what we've always wanted. Peaceful coexistence, cultural exchange, mutual prosperity. The only difference is that now you know we have the power to protect what we value. The vote to grant humanity full council membership was unanimous, though it took 3 days to create a new classification system. Tier Omega was established specifically for humanity, a level that existed beyond all previous measurements. Minister Oh Sung-min was appointed as humanity's new council representative, a man who appeared to be in his 50s, but whose personnel file showed he had been serving the Terran government for over 2 centuries. His inaugural speech was brief, but memorable. We could have conquered this galaxy 1,000 times over, he said, standing at the same podium where aliens had once dismissed human offers of help, but conquest isn't victory. True strength isn't in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when not to use it. The months that followed brought unprecedented changes. Human scientists began sharing their technology, though carefully and gradually. The hegemony's plasma cannons were quietly upgraded to be 90% more efficient. Talon shields were enhanced with human frequency modulators that made them nearly impenetrable. The territorial dispute that had nearly led to war was resolved in a single afternoon when Minister O suggested a simple compromise that satisfied both sides. Nobody argued with his recommendations, especially with Admiral Kong's fleet still visible in the distance. Kim Minho found himself busier than ever. This time, teaching alien children about human culture without having to pretend their technology was primitive. His stories of human determination and resourcefulness took on new meaning. When his audience realized that humans had survived and thrived in conditions that would have destroyed most civilizations, 1 year after the revelation, Captain Ji-won stood in the same observation lounge where he had first watched the council station. The view was the same, but everything had changed. Human and alien vessels moved together in peaceful formations, their crews working side by side to explore the galaxy's remaining mysteries. Dr. Park joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea brewed from leaves grown in Earth's orbital gardens. The simple pleasure of sharing tea had become a diplomatic tradition throughout the galaxy. Any regrets about the revelation? She asked, offering him a cup. Ji-won accepted the tea and considered the question. Outside the viewport, young Altarian pilot was receiving flying lessons from a human instructor whose ship could travel between dimensions. In the distance, joint research teams were preparing to explore a newly discovered star system. Ain't none, he replied finally. We gave them the chance to know us as equals. They chose to see us as primitives. Sometimes you have to show people the truth before they're ready to accept it. A chime announced an incoming message. The Council had approved humanity's proposal for a joint exploration mission to the galactic core, where ancient mysteries waited to be solved. For the first time in centuries, humans wouldn't have to face the unknown alone. Dr. Park smiled as she watched the mixed fleet prepare for departure. The age of hiding was over. Humanity had finally taken its place as the galaxy's quiet guardians, not as conquerors, but as the species that had learned the most difficult lesson of all. True power wasn't in the strength to rule, but in the wisdom to guide. The end.